Today, we're diving into one of the most common ways to structure a company in the entire world. It seems totally logical and it's used everywhere. But as we're about to find out, it might be hiding a really dangerous flaw.
I know, it sounds like the start of a bad joke, right? But this question is actually at the heart of how companies grow, and sometimes how they get themselves into a whole lot of trouble. The journey from a simple canoe to a massive icebreaker, well, it's way more common than you might think.
So what's this journey called? It's diversification. And it's a story of growth that usually starts with really small, logical steps, but it can end up in a place that's completely unrecognizable. Let's trace how that happens. The thing is, each step along the way feels perfectly natural. I mean, you make canoes, so why not make kayaks too? You're already serving people who love the water, so paddles and docks make total sense. Every single decision is logical on its own, but you string enough of those decisions together and you can find yourself in a business that has basically nothing to do with where you started. And that, my friends, is the road to becoming a conglomerate. So how do you even begin to manage all this growing complexity? Well, companies adopt what's called the divisional form. The idea is actually pretty simple. You just create a separate division for each business. You've got your canoe division, your dock division, your icebreaker division. A central headquarters oversees all of them, not by getting into the weeds, but by setting performance targets, numbers they have to hit. On the surface, it really does seem like the perfect solution.
Now, this whole transformation doesn't just happen overnight. The source material we're looking at actually outlines a pretty clear, almost inevitable four-stage process. It shows how a simple company evolves into this complex, multi-business machine.
Okay, so you start out with what's called the integrated form. That's when a company does everything in one single chain. But then you might start selling off some of the intermediate parts, like maybe the wooden yokes for the canoes. Suddenly you're in the byproduct form. Once those byproducts become a real business in their own right, you've hit the related product form. And finally, when you're making giant icebreakers that have zero to do with canoes, you've officially arrived at the conglomerate form.
So how do you get so diversified? Well, there are really two main ways. You can expand out, which is when you grow new businesses from your existing one, kind of like how 3M grew from sandpaper into everything. It's like a crystal growing. The new parts are different, but they still share some of that original DNA. The other way is to acquire in, just buying other companies. And this is where things get really tricky. I mean, even if one brewery buys another brewery, their internal cultures can be so different that getting them to work together can be a complete nightmare. And to really hammer this point home, the source gives us this amazing analogy. Think about merging two colonies of bees. You can't just dump them into the same box. They'll literally kill each other. No, what you do is you put a newspaper between them with tiny holes in it. They slowly get used to each other's scent, chew through the paper, and merge peacefully. Merging two company cultures is just as delicate, and believe me, it can be just as destructive if you get it wrong. Okay, so we've got this structure that gives different divisions the autonomy to run their own businesses. It looks like power is being handed down from the top, like the company is becoming more decentralized. But is that what's really going on here?
And that brings us to the absolute core of the issue. On the surface, it looks a whole lot like decentralization, right? You've got these division managers, they're running their own show, making their own decisions, but is that the whole story?
Bam! There it is, a direct quote from the source material that just completely flips conventional wisdom on its head. The idea that this structure is the same as decentralization is apparently a widespread myth. So, if the power isn't really with the divisions, where is it?
Well, the power stays right where it started, with headquarters. Think about it. HQ always holds these four critical levers of control. They're the ones who decide which businesses to buy or sell. They hire and fire the division managers. They control the flow of cash, moving it from one division to another. And they provide all the essential support services like legal or HR. So yeah, the divisions have freedom, but it's freedom inside a very tightly controlled financial cage that's built and managed by the central office. You know what? The most famous example of this proves the point perfectly. Back in the day, General Motors was just this loose collection of different car companies. When Alfred Sloan came in and created the divisional structure, everyone called it decentralization. But what he actually did was take all these independent businesses and put them under the thumb of a strong, financially controlled headquarters. He didn't decentralize GM, he centralized it. And we've kind of been using the wrong word for it ever since.
So how exactly does headquarters maintain all this central control? They do it with one incredibly powerful tool, performance measurement. But this tool, which was designed to be the solution, can actually become the source of the biggest problems of all.
We've all heard this a million times. It's the mantra of modern management.
It's the core belief that drives this entire divisional structure. And what it suggests is that everything that's important can and must be boiled down to a simple number.
But here's the dangerous flip side to that. What happens when our obsession with measurement actually makes us blind? What if the things that matter most, things like quality, real innovation, social well-being, are the very things that are the hardest to put a number on? Let's break this down. When we scream for efficiency, our brains instinctively focus on what's easiest to measure. So, for a restaurant, that means we measure speed of service, not the quality of the food. For school, we measure the cost of heating the building, not the quality of the education happening inside it. We say we want groundbreaking innovation, but what we actually measure are tiny, predictable, incremental changes, because big leaps are risky and really hard to quantify. We end up managing for all the wrong things.
And the consequences of this, they're really serious. First, we focus on the economy of it all. We cut costs we can see, and in the process, we destroy value we can't see, like long-term research or basic maintenance. Second, we end up ignoring massive social costs, like pollution, because, hey, it doesn't show up on the balance sheet. And third, this pushes our whole society towards valuing what's cheap and fast over what's actually good and healthy.
And what this all means is that when a headquarters demands nothing but steady, predictable, measurable performance, it takes its most innovative divisions, the ones that need to be messy and creative and take risks, and shoves them into a rigid straitjacket. A division that was built for creativity simply can't survive when it's being managed like a soulless machine.
And, this isn't just a problem for giant corporations. This exact mindset, this exact structure, has been adopted by governments and public institutions. And that's where the consequences can be even more severe. This structure is a particularly terrible fit for government for three big reasons. First, public goals, like good education or quality healthcare, are social goals. They are incredibly hard to measure with a simple number. Second, accountability gets all messed up. In a crisis, politicians who answer to the voting public are always going to step in and override the managers. And third, and this is a big one, unlike a failing business that goes bankrupt, a dysfunctional government department doesn't have a failure mechanism. It can just linger on, getting worse and worse indefinitely. And this really brings us to the final stark warning from our source. When this structure is taken to its absolute extreme, it doesn't just have a few problems. It's fundamentally unstable. It becomes a structure that's teetering on the edge of a cliff, where one more step toward pure, numbers-driven control can send the whole thing shattering into pieces.
And that leaves us with a pretty critical question to think about. The next time you hear somebody demanding more efficiency, whether it's in business or in public life, just ask yourself this: what are they actually measuring? And maybe more importantly, what essential, unmeasurable value are they ignoring, or even destroying in the process?